You have $650 million. Nobody knows. Right now, you are standing in your kitchen, pouring cereal into a bowl that has a chip in the rim. You have owned this bowl for 6 years. You have never once thought about replacing it. You are wearing the same gray t-shirt you wore yesterday. The shirt cost $11. You bought it at a store with fluorescent lighting and a sale rack. You have $650 million, and you are checking if the milk has gone bad. This is not a disguise. This is not a bit. This is just Tuesday. 3 years ago, you sold a company. The number that hit your account had 9 digits in it, and you remember staring at the screen for almost a full minute without breathing. You remember thinking the number looked fake. You remember thinking it would feel different than this. It did not feel different. It still doesn't. You finish the cereal. You rinse the bowl. You drive to work in a car that is 11 years old because the car runs fine and because buying a new one would require explaining why you don't need to think about money anymore. And you are not ready to explain that to anyone. Not your coworkers, not your sister, not the people who knew you before. At work, your coworker Devin leans over the cubicle wall holding his phone like it's a trophy. Bro, I just got approved for the new truck. 68 grand. 68. He says the number twice, like saying it again will make it bigger. First in my family to ever finance something this big. You nod. You say it's awesome, because it is awesome to him, and his excitement is not less real because you have 950 times what he just financed sitting in index funds that update themselves while he sleeps. You have learned something most people never have to learn, that the size of a number doesn't change how much it costs you to keep it secret. It costs you a lot. You think back to the day the wire transfer cleared. Your business partner, Marcus, called you screaming with joy, already listing the things he was about to buy. A boat, a house in Tulum, a watch he'd had bookmarked for 4 years. You listened to him plan his entire next decade out loud in real time. You hung up the phone and sat in your apartment for 2 hours and did not move. You weren't sad. You weren't scared. You were calculating something that had no name yet, a kind of math that wasn't about money at all. It was about who you would become if people knew. It was about how many conversations would change. It was about how your mother would start introducing you differently at family dinners. How cousins you hadn't spoken to since middle school would suddenly remember your birthday. How every friend would do quiet math behind their eyes every time you picked up a check. You decided, somewhere in that silence, that you would rather be underestimated than transformed. So you built a life that hides the number instead of one that announces it. Your money manager, a quiet, steady woman named Renata, is the only person who knows the real figure. She manages 3 other clients exactly like you, people who are richer than entire small towns and who you would never pick out of a crowd. Renata once told you something you've never forgotten. The first million changes how you sleep. Every million after that just changes how much you have to hide. You believed her before you understood her. Now you understand her completely. There is a cost to this kind of silence, and the cost is not financial. The cost is that no one fully knows you. Your sister Priya calls you most Sundays. She is stressed about a promotion that would bump her salary to $71,000 a year, and she talks about it the way people talk about a finish line. Relief just past the horizon, almost close enough to touch. You listen. You ask good questions. You mean every word of encouragement you give her. And the entire time, some small disconnected part of your brain is doing the math on what $71,000 is compared to what you make in interest before she finishes her coffee. You hate that part of your brain. You never let it speak out loud. You have learned to live 2 lives stitched together at the seam. The life people see, ordinary and unremarkable, and the life that actually exists, vast and silent underneath it, like a foundation nobody knows is holding up the house. There was one night it almost slipped. You were at a bar with old friends from college, the kind of night where everyone gets a little looser than usual. Someone brought up real estate, complaining about rent increases, and you said, almost without thinking, I mean, you could just buy the building instead of renting from it. The table went quiet for half a second. Buy the building, your friend Theo repeated, laughing. Yeah, let me just buy a building, real quick, hold on. You laughed too. You turned it into a joke about hypotheticals. You changed the subject fast, heart going harder than it should for something so small. That was the closest anyone has ever come to knowing. You drove home that night thinking about how strange it is to be the richest person at almost every table you sit at, and the last person anyone would ever guess it. You are not lonely in the traditional sense. You have people. You have Priya. You have Theo. You have Devin and his truck. You have Renata who knows everything and judges nothing. But there is a specific, quieter kind of loneliness that doesn't have a word in most languages. The loneliness of being fully loved by people who only know 60% of who you actually are. You used to think money would solve that. It didn't. If anything, it's the reason the gap exists. About a year ago, you met someone else who lives like this. His name is Walter, an older man, soft-spoken, who you met through Renata at a small dinner that wasn't really a dinner, it was a wedding. Walter is worth, by Renata's estimate, somewhere north of $2 billion. He wears a windbreaker. He drives himself everywhere. Nobody in his town has any idea. Walter said something to you that night that you still think about constantly. You'll spend your whole life being asked if you're happy now. The truth nobody wants is that the money didn't make me anything. It just removed one excuse for not becoming who I already was. You didn't fully understand that sentence until months later, lying awake, replaying every version of the life you could have built if you'd announced the number the day it landed. The boats, the watches, the version of you that would have to perform wealth instead of just having it. You don't think that version of you would have been happier. You think that version of you would have been busier. There's a difference, and it took you years to see it. Last month, there was a test you didn't expect. Devin's mother got sick. Nothing terminal but expensive. A surgery their insurance wouldn't fully cover. Somewhere in the 5-figure range that would have taken Devin 2 years to save for. He didn't ask you for anything. He didn't even know to ask. He just mentioned it quietly one afternoon, staring at his desk, doing the kind of math people do when they're trying to make an impossible number smaller by sheer force of attention. You could have paid for it that same day without noticing the withdrawal. You didn't tell him that. You told Renata to find a way, anonymously, through a foundation she manages for exactly these situations. A foundation with no name attached to you, set up 2 years before Devin's mother ever got sick, built quietly for moments just like this one. 3 weeks later, Devin told you the surgery got covered by some hospital grant program he didn't fully understand and didn't question. He was relieved. He moved on with his life. He still has no idea. You felt something that night you don't have a clean word for. Not pride, exactly. Something closer to peace. That's when you understood what Walter meant. The money was never about the number. The number was just a tool that let you stop needing anyone to see you do the right thing in order for it to count. You still drive the 11-year-old car. You still rinse the chipped bowl every morning. Devin still talks about his truck like it's the biggest financial event of the decade. And to him, right now, it is. And that's allowed to be true at the same time your number is true. You used to think silence was the price you paid for safety. Now you think silence is just what peace sounds like when nobody's asking you to prove it. You have $650 million. Nobody knows. And for the first time, that doesn't feel like something you're hiding. It feels like something you finally get to keep.